My parents took my son's therapy budget for something more urgent. My sister posted about her self-care spa days. When I listened to her bragging, she called him just sensitive. I lost it. My revenge made them both irrelevant. I got him sponsored therapy through her ex's foundation. I'm Nora. I'm 43, a single mom living in Asheville, North Carolina. What started as a plea for support for my son's mental health turned into the most hurtful betrayal I've ever experienced, by my own family. They made me feel like I was asking for too much, like Silas was exaggerating his pain. When I found out where the therapy money went, and what my sister had to say about it, I quietly unraveled. But instead of screaming or pleading, I got even in a way they never saw coming. They underestimated me, and more importantly, they underestimated how far I'd go for my son. I never imagined being a mother would look like this. Raising Silas on my own, scraping together bills, managing school pickups, juggling work deadlines, and somewhere in between, being his entire emotional safety net. He's 12, sensitive in ways that make the world seem too sharp for him. It started with nightmares, progressed to anxiety attacks that left him trembling under his blankets, and then the silences. The kind of silences that aren't peaceful, they're too loud to ignore. It broke me. His school counselor, Mrs. Halford, referred us to a child therapist. The initial consultation was promising but pricey, $180 a session. The clinic recommended biweekly appointments. That's $360 a month. My job as a paralegal at a modest law firm barely stretched to cover rent and groceries, let alone specialized therapy. I hesitated before asking my parents. We weren't a warm and fuzzy family, but they always said they'd be there when it mattered. So I told them everything. I laid it all bare, the panic attacks, the nights I'd hold Silas while he sobbed into my shirt, how he begged me not to make him go to school sometimes. June, my mother, didn't even flinch. She clasped her hands like she was at a church potluck and said, "You know, your father and I always planned to help with special needs. Of course we'll pitch in." It felt like a miracle. For 6 months, they sent over a monthly payment directly to the clinic. It wasn't warm love, but it was the kind of practical help that saves lives. Silas was starting to smile again. Not the polite smile he gave strangers, but the one where his whole face glowed. We had hope again. Until the call came. I still remember where I was, Walmart parking lot, late March. I had just picked up paper towels and Silas's favorite cinnamon granola. The voicemail from the clinic was polite, professional, but devastating. The most recent payment for Silas's sessions didn't go through. We'll need to pause future appointments until the account is settled. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. But I checked my email and found that 2 months of therapy hadn't been paid. Confused and panicked, I called my parents. My dad didn't pick up. My mom did. Her voice was overly bright. "Oh, yes," she said. "We meant to talk to you about that. We had a little situation here." That little situation turned out to be a full remodel of their guest bathroom. Your father slipped on the tiles. He could have been really hurt. So we thought it best to get everything redone. The quote came back a bit higher than expected, Italian tile, custom cabinets, you know. So we had to dip into that account. She said it so casually, like she'd returned a borrowed casserole dish late. "You used the therapy fund?" I asked. "Well," she said, sighing like I was being dramatic, "we figured Silas had had a good run. He seems better. And besides, you always find a way." I hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't cry until I was parked outside the school, watching Silas walk toward me with his backpack swinging and those wide, hopeful eyes. That's what broke me. Not the betrayal, but how little they thought of him. That weekend, we met for lunch, an attempt at pretending we were still a family. Silas came with me. He was quieter than usual, sketching something with a mechanical pencil while we waited for our food. Then came Marcy. My sister has always been aspirational. Designer handbags, Botox at 35, vegan when it's trendy. She strolled in late, her heels clicking, phone in one hand, sunglasses perched on her head despite being inside. She barely glanced at Silas before launching into a story about her self-renewal weekend at the Umstead Spa. My soul was absolutely vibrating, she said, as if it was a universal experience. Then she said the words that rewired something in me. "Well, I mean, Silas is just sensitive. Kids are so coddled these days." He heard her. His hand froze on the paper. His shoulders curled inward. I felt something rise in my chest. Rage, grief, helplessness, all wrapped in one sharp point of focus. I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I simply looked at my son, put my hand on his back, and said, "We're going home." Their stunned silence followed me all the way out the door. I didn't speak to them again for weeks. I scrambled. Cut corners. I took on freelance paralegal work for a corporate lawyer in Atlanta, working late into the night after Silas went to sleep. I stopped buying anything that wasn't essential. We lived lean, but we managed 2 sessions a month again. Then, one day, a coworker mentioned a community health grant through a nonprofit she used to volunteer with. I looked it up. It was a foundation that funded youth mental health resources, especially for families experiencing financial hardship in North Carolina. And guess who was listed as one of their executive board members? Theo. Marcy's ex. They'd broken up after 5 years, messy, from what I'd heard. I met him once at a wedding, years ago. Quiet, thoughtful guy. I remembered he'd worked in nonprofit leadership, but not this. I didn't say I was Marcy's sister. I created a clean application and attached everything: letters from Silas's school counselor, a note from his therapist, even parts of his drawings that expressed his anxiety visually. I didn't expect much. But 3 weeks later, I got an email. "Dear Nora, thank you for submitting Silas's application. We were moved by his story and admire your dedication as a parent. We're pleased to inform you that the foundation will be sponsoring his therapy sessions for the next 12 months. I had to read it 3 times before it sank in. The same day, I received a personal message from Theo. "Hi Nora, I just wanted to say how glad I am that we're able to support Silas. I remember you from Marcy's cousin's wedding. You were wearing that blue dress, right? You spoke so kindly about your son back then. Some people talk about kids as burdens. You didn't." He ended with this: "Marcy and I didn't end on great terms, but reading about Silas was a reminder of the kind of work that actually matters. I hope this makes things a bit easier." I stared at that email for a long time. And then, I smiled. Not because of Theo, not because of revenge. But because my son, my sweet, sensitive boy, was finally going to get what he needed. And the very people who dismissed him were now completely removed from that path forward. Of course, my sister found out. And that's when everything started to unravel for her. I didn't expect Marcy to find out so quickly. But knowing her, she probably has Google alerts for her own name and anything remotely connected to her world. About a week after I received the confirmation from the foundation, I noticed Marcy's name tagged in a post on LinkedIn. The foundation had announced a list of recent family grant recipients, praising their resilience and spotlighting mental health awareness. There was a vague mention of a young boy overcoming trauma with the help of art therapy, and Silas's drawing had been used, with his name omitted, of course, for privacy. But I recognized it instantly. The quiet storm of dark swirls and broken bridges he had drawn after one of his anxiety episodes was unmistakable. The post gained traction. People commented. Some shared their own experiences. A few tagged friends or thanked the foundation. It was beautiful. Then came the phone call. It was around 9:45 p.m. Silas was asleep, and I was folding laundry in the living room when my phone buzzed. "Marcy." I stared at the screen, debating. I hadn't spoken to her since that restaurant lunch, and I'd kept it that way on purpose. I let it ring. She called again. Then again. Finally, she sent a text: "Wow. Really classy move, Nora. You went to him? Are you seriously this petty?" I didn't respond. A day later, she emailed me. A full-on essay. She accused me of exploiting Silas's mild issues to manipulate an organization, embarrassing the family by getting involved with her ex's circle, and playing the victim for clout. But what stood out the most was the sentence: "You've always had a flair for dramatics. No wonder Silas turned out the way he did." That one. I couldn't ignore it. I typed and deleted a reply 5 times. Then I sent 3 words: "You're blocked now." And I meant it. I blocked her on everything: phone, email, social, even Venmo, not that she ever sent me a dime. A few days later, I got a message from Theo again. This time, it was short. "I heard from Marcy. Don't worry, she has no say in anything we fund. Your application was reviewed independently and approved on merit. Silas deserves this. Let me know if there's anything else we can help with. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could exhale. Silas didn't know the details. He just knew that a kind organization was helping us. That his therapy appointments were now guaranteed, as he put it. And when he found out he'd been invited to join a youth art collective the foundation also sponsored, he lit up like I hadn't seen since before the divorce. It was an afternoon in early May when the real fallout began. My parents called me, first my mother, then my father. They both left voicemails. Mom was clipped and laced with guilt. I think you've taken things a little far. Family doesn't turn against family. And now your sister's very upset. This public stunt, it's humiliating. My father's message was more subdued. You've made your point, Nora. We get it. But maybe it's time to let things cool off. We didn't mean to hurt you or Silas. You know we love you both. Love. That word always came with strings in my family. Love meant conditional tolerance. It meant smoothing things over to avoid discomfort. It meant covering cracks with wallpaper instead of fixing the foundation. I didn't return the calls. Meanwhile, Marcy's social media posts started to shift. She was quieter. Her usual flood of wellness selfies and hashtag manifesting captions dropped off. One of the few posts that did appear was a cryptic story, a picture of a wine glass and the words, "Some people just can't let go of the past." A few days later, I received a message from a woman named Raquel through a mutual friend. Raquel had dated Theo briefly after Marcy. She worked in early childhood advocacy and had seen Silas's drawing in the foundation's newsletter. She asked if I'd be open to participating in a local art therapy workshop panel as a parent speaker. I hesitated. I wasn't a public speaker. I wasn't even someone who liked being looked at for too long. But then I thought about Silas. I said yes. The event was small, held at a library downtown, filled with parents, a few teachers, and nonprofit organizers. I told our story. I talked about what it felt like to watch your child unravel and how lonely it is to be dismissed by the people who are supposed to care the most. After I finished, I saw someone in the back of the room stand up. My breath caught. It was Theo. He nodded at me, nothing grand, just a quiet gesture of acknowledgement. I nodded back. And that's when I realized something. I hadn't just gotten revenge. I'd built something better in the process. My parents were still trapped in their outdated thinking. Marcy was drowning in her own curated life. But Silas was healing. I was stronger. And we were surrounded, finally, by people who saw him. Who saw me? Not as a drama queen. Not as a charity case. But as a mother. Doing her best. Refusing to back down. It was sometime in late June when I got the first envelope in the mail from the foundation, not an email, not a phone call, but an actual envelope with a wax seal. Inside was a simple thank you note for speaking at the panel, along with a printout of a message board thread from the event where other parents had shared their takeaways. One comment in particular stood out. I felt like I'd been yelling into the wind for years. Listening to that mom talk about how her family ignored her son's anxiety. It made me feel less alone. I wish someone had said that to me 5 years ago. I read it 3 times. I cried a little, quietly, sitting on the back steps with a glass of iced tea and Silas's cat rubbing against my leg. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that I wasn't just flailing in the dark, that I hadn't made it all up. Around the same time, Silas was invited to join a summer workshop at a studio space in Weaverville, just outside of Asheville. The building was an old converted barn surrounded by wildflowers and community gardens. Every Thursday afternoon, a group of 12 kids worked with 2 rotating therapists and an art instructor. They painted, built sculptures, made papier-mâché masks, things that looked simple but were structured around emotional expression and self-awareness. Silas loved it. And not just the projects, he loved being seen as a whole person, not a nervous kid, not someone to be hushed or brushed aside. He made friends. He even laughed out loud a few times. For him, that was a big deal. I would drop him off, wait in the garden cafe next door, and sometimes chat with other parents. I started recognizing their stories and mine, different details, same core ache. Then, sometime in mid-July, my mother showed up at my door. I hadn't seen her in person since the therapy fund incident. She wore one of her tailored jackets, sunglasses perched on her head like a prop from a soap opera, and she held a pie. Classic June. Appear calm, carry baked goods, and never acknowledge the elephant in the room until it's sitting on your chest. Thought you might want this, she said, holding out the pie like it could undo everything. I didn't take it. I'd like to talk to Silas, she said. No, I replied, evenly. You can talk to me. Her lips twitched slightly. You're really doing this? Keeping him from his grandparents? No, I said. You did that. When you decided the new bathroom tile mattered more than his mental health. Her face darkened. It wasn't like that. Wasn't it? She looked tired then, for just a moment. Like she realized the playbook she'd been using for decades wasn't working on me anymore. I know we hurt you, she said. But you've embarrassed your sister. Theo's board is talking. She says you made her look like a monster. I actually laughed. She did that herself, I said. I'm just not covering it up anymore. She left without another word. Left the pie on the porch, though. I threw it away. After that, things quieted. I didn't hear from Marcy again, not directly. But one of her Instagram posts popped up on a friend's account. She had apparently started a new blog called Healing with Marcy, where she offered emotional alignment coaching. The bio said, helping you find your truth through curated balance and essential oils. The audacity. I showed the screen to Silas one night, after he'd asked why we didn't go to Nana and Grandpa's anymore. I guess some people have trouble telling the truth, I said carefully. He looked at the post. His eyes scanned it, then he shrugged. I think I'm okay with that, he said. They don't really get it anyway. That night, as I tucked him in, I noticed something taped to the side of his desk. A doodle he'd made, a drawing of a bridge made of patchwork fabric. Underneath it, he'd written in his neat block letters, you don't have to fix where you came from to go somewhere better. I stood there staring at it long after he fell asleep. Silas was still going to therapy. He still had bad days, panic flared when things got overwhelming or when someone raised their voice unexpectedly, but he was learning tools. He was standing up straighter, finding language for his fear, and, slowly, claiming his place in the world. And even though my family remained distant and bruised by their own egos, I had stopped missing them. Because I was building something stronger, something that didn't rely on guilt or obligation. I was building a home where Silas could breathe. And nothing, not tile floors or spa hashtags, was going to shake that. About 2 months later, life had settled into something that resembled peace. Silas's therapy had stabilized. The art collective invited him to help curate a small gallery showcase in downtown Asheville. He was shy about it, and didn't want to make a big deal, but I could see the pride behind his quiet eyes. He'd started talking more at school, participating in class. His therapist told me he even advocated for himself in a group session when another kid mocked someone else's drawing. That used to be the kind of situation where he would shrink. But not anymore. Me? I was different, too. Lighter. It's strange how shedding certain people makes you feel like you finally have room to breathe. Then, one evening, I got a message from a nonprofit conference coordinator in Charlotte. They were planning a panel on ethical funding practices and the politics of family involvement in mental health advocacy. It was specific. Too specific. I knew immediately who must have mentioned me. Theo. The email ended with, Theo Carmichael recommended you for this panel. He said you had first-hand experience with both the harm and the healing that can come from close-knit networks. It felt poetic. Marcy, who'd accused me of humiliating the family by working with her ex, had now inadvertently helped me become a public speaker on the very issue she tried to erase. At first, I said no. Then I reconsidered. Not because I wanted the spotlight. But because the timing was right. What came next wasn't revenge in the way movies write it. No tantrums. No social media exposés. No shouting matches. What came next was calculated, quiet, and cutting in all the ways that mattered. The panel was held at a small university campus in Charlotte. I drove there early, with Silas's drawing folder in the passenger seat. When I arrived, I was ushered into a green room with 2 psychologists, a youth counselor from Raleigh, and a nonprofit board member. They were all gracious, warm, and sharp as tacks. As we prepped, one of the coordinators said, "Funny thing, our keynote speaker had to drop out last minute." So we tapped one of our donors to do a quick intro. A local businesswoman. She just started a wellness blog, actually. I knew who it was before they said her name. Marcy. I didn't tell them anything. I didn't pull out receipts or demand she be removed. I just smiled and waited. When the panel started, I sat behind the curtain and listened to her give her brief opening remarks. Marcy was composed. Well-dressed. Polished, like always. She used phrases like personal transformation, energy alignment, and creating healthy boundaries, which was ironic enough that I nearly snorted. Then she added, "My journey as a caregiver to family members with anxiety has taught me so much about compassion." Caregiver? That's when I stood up and stepped onto the stage. The moderator introduced me. I walked to the mic with Silas's drawing folder in my hands and, slowly, placed it on the podium before I began. "Hi, I'm Nora," I said. Single mother to a boy who was learning to live in a world that once terrified him. I'm not here to talk about theory. I'm here to talk about the time my family called my son too sensitive, took his therapy budget to renovate a bathroom, and then expected me to keep quiet about it. The room was dead silent. I wasn't angry. I wasn't dramatic. I was steady. Just a mother speaking the truth. I won't name names, I added. But I will say this, if you ever find yourself choosing tile over therapy, silence over support, you are part of the problem. From the corner of my eye, I saw Marcy freeze behind the curtain. After the panel, I didn't seek her out. I shook hands with the other speakers, answered questions from guests, and left. But I didn't go home just yet. I had one final thread to pull. 2 days later, I contacted Theo. Not for more help, not for a favor. But because I'd learned something through the conference grapevine. Marcy had been trying to pitch herself to several nonprofits as a spokesperson for mental health awareness. She was hoping to land a board position with a national advocacy group. I sent Theo a copy of her blog post about raising awareness through spiritual exfoliation and the clip from the panel where she claimed to be a caregiver. Then I wrote, "I don't want to drag this out. But if she's pitching herself for a seat on anyone's board, they should know the truth. Silence is what lets people like this climb. You do what you think is right." He replied the next morning. I forwarded everything to the committee. "Thanks, Nora. You're not just helping Silas, you're protecting the future of mental health spaces." A week later, Marcy's blog was set to private. 2 weeks after that, she quietly removed any mention of advocacy from her LinkedIn profile. 3 weeks later, I heard from a mutual cousin that Marcy was taking a digital break to focus inward. She hasn't spoken to me since. She hasn't spoken to Silas either. Which is for the best. My parents eventually stopped calling too. No fights, no drama, just silence. The kind that follows when people finally understand they've lost all leverage. And us? We're good. We have new people now. Silas has a community. I have peace. Our home is small but full of air and light and love, the kind that doesn't come with conditions. Sometimes, revenge doesn't have to look like retribution. Sometimes, the best revenge is telling the truth so clearly, so publicly, and so unapologetically, that the people who tried to silence you are left without a single word to say.